Marcus Reynolds pushed open the door of his two-bedroom apartment in Renton at 10:45 on a Thursday night, every muscle in his body begging for collapse. The walk from his truck to the third-floor landing felt like climbing Everest in steel-toed boots. 16 hours replacing the HVAC system in the North Tower of Hayes Technologies. Third consecutive double shift this week. His blue work uniform carried the stench of machine oil and sweat, the knees stained dark from crawling through ventilation shafts, his hands still tingling from the vibration of power tools. Emma was sleeping over at his sister Beth's place until morning. The apartment should have been silent, dark, empty. But water was running in the kitchen, dishes clinked against porcelain. Footsteps moved across the tile floor he'd installed himself 2 years ago when the landlord refused to fix the cracked linoleum. Marcus's pulse kicked into overdrive. Someone was inside his home. He moved down the hallway without breathing, each step deliberate and silent, despite the weight of his work boots. His hand closed around the umbrella near the coat rack. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. The kitchen lights spilled into the darkened living room, casting long shadows that danced with each movement of whoever stood at his sink. A woman. Back turned, dark hair falling loose past her shoulders. White blouse that probably cost more than his monthly rent. A pair of expensive heels lay discarded beside the counter as if she'd been here long enough to get comfortable. She turned. Marcus froze completely, the umbrella slipping from suddenly numb fingers. Victoria Hayes, CEO of Hayes Technologies, the woman who'd built a $280 million company from nothing. The woman employees whispered about in break rooms, calling her the Ice Queen for the way she could fire someone without a flicker of emotion crossing her face. The woman Marcus had only ever seen from a distance during quarterly all-hands meetings, standing at podiums in $1,000 suits, her voice crisp and emotionless as she discussed profit margins and strategic initiatives. Standing in his kitchen, at his sink, washing his dishes. The absurdity of it punched through his exhaustion like a shot of adrenaline. Her voice came out soft, almost gentle, too controlled, like she was delivering bad news to a terminal patient and trying to cushion the blow. "Mr. Reynolds, I know you weren't expecting me." The formality of it struck him as almost funny. Almost. If his heart wasn't hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" The words came out harder than he'd intended, but rage was replacing shock now. This woman who'd never spoken to him, who walked past maintenance workers like they were furniture, who represented everything wrong with corporate America, was standing in his kitchen like she belonged here. Victoria set down the plate she'd been washing with the kind of care someone might use handling a museum artifact. Her face remained composed, professional, the same mask she probably wore in board meetings. But her eyes told a different story. Not surprise, not embarrassment, regret. "I came here to tell you the truth about what's been happening to you at Hayes Technologies, about why you've been suffering." Her voice wavered on the last word and the first crack in that professional veneer. Marcus watched her hands grip the edge of his sink knuckles, whitening. "And Marcus, what I'm about to tell you will break your heart." A bitter laugh escaped him before he could stop it. No humor in it. Just the sound of a man who'd been pushed too far and was too tired to care about consequences. "You're the CEO of a company worth hundreds of millions. You don't make house calls. You don't wash employees' dishes at 11 at night. So what is this really, some kind of PR stunt? Undercover boss episode I didn't sign up for?" Victoria turned to face him fully, and for the first time Marcus really looked at her. Really saw her. The dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. The way strands of hair had escaped from what had probably been a tight bun hours ago, the slight tremor in her hands as she brushed them against her slacks. She moved to his kitchen table, the cheap one he'd bought at a yard sale 3 years ago, and sat down. Her shoulders sagged in a way Marcus had never seen from the Ice Queen. A gesture of surrender, of exhaustion, of something that looked dangerously close to defeat. "Please sit down." "I'd rather stand, and it's Mr. Reynolds to you." The formality felt important, a way to maintain distance, to remember she wasn't a person in his kitchen, but the embodiment of a system that had been grinding him down for 2 years. Silence stretched between them like a physical thing. Victoria's composure fractured just slightly, hairline cracks spreading across that professional mask. "You're right, I've been blind." willfully blind. She pulled out the chair across from where he stood and lowered herself into it like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. I built this company with my own hands. 8 years ago, I was 23 with $30,000, a Stanford dropout, with a dream of creating a workplace where people mattered. I worked 100-hour weeks, sacrificed relationships, health, any semblance of a normal life. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing the people who actually make my company run. Marcus wanted to stay angry. Anger was safe. Anger kept him from feeling the hope that was trying to claw its way up his throat. But something in her eyes, raw and vulnerable and utterly sincere, made it hard to hold on to. 4 weeks ago, I was reviewing financial records, budget allocations that didn't match up. I started digging, and what I found, she pulled papers from a leather bag Marcus hadn't noticed sitting beside the table. Spreadsheets, payroll documents, employee records. Marcus, do you know why you work 16-hour shifts while other technicians work 8? The shift in tone caught him off guard. Direct, pointed, like she was cross-examining him in a deposition. Because Richard says we're short-staffed. You're not short-staffed. Victoria pushed the papers across his table. Marcus moved closer despite himself, his eyes scanning names and numbers that didn't make sense at first. Rebecca Foster, employee ID 4782, HVAC technician. Hired 18 months ago, salary $47,000 annually. Bank deposits to Wells Fargo account ending in 8291. William Grant, employee ID 4791, electrical technician. Hired 20 months ago, salary $49,000 annually. Bank deposits to Chase account ending in 4405. Trevor Hudson, employee ID 4805, systems technician. Hired 22 months ago. Salary $48,500 annually. Bank deposits to Bank of America account ending in 7732. These 3 people don't exist. Victoria's voice had gone flat. Clinical, like she was reading a coroner's report. Richard Holloway has been reporting phantom employees to corporate, collecting their salaries and making you cover the workload of 4 people. Marcus felt his legs go weak. He sank into the chair without deciding to, his hands reaching for the papers like they might reveal this was all some terrible mistake, some misunderstanding. But the numbers didn't lie. $144,500 per year, times 2 years. $289,000. The words came out of Victoria's mouth like she was pronouncing a death sentence. Richard has been stealing from this company, from you, for 2 years. Marcus couldn't breathe. The kitchen walls felt like they were closing in. 2 years of wondering why he was always exhausted, why he couldn't keep up, why every shift felt like drowning. 2 years of missing Emma's school plays because he was replacing air handlers that should have been William Grant's job. Missing parent-teacher conferences because he was rewiring electrical systems that should have been Rebecca Foster's responsibility. Missing bedtime stories because he was troubleshooting HVAC controls that should have been Trevor Hudson's problem. But Rebecca and William and Trevor didn't exist, had never existed, were just names on paper funneling money into Richard Holloway's bank accounts, while Marcus destroyed his body trying to do the impossible. That's not all. Victoria's voice pulled him back from the edge of whatever dark place his mind was spiraling toward. She slid another set of documents across the table. 2 folders, one red, one blue. Your performance reviews, the ones that have kept you from getting promoted for 2 years. Marcus didn't want to look, knew what they said, had memorized every word of those reviews, had read them late at night when Emma was asleep, trying to figure out what he was doing wrong, how he could improve, what he needed to fix. But Victoria opened the red folder first. Official performance review. Marcus Reynolds error rate, 12%, productivity, 78% of standard overall assessment, meets requirements but needs improvement. Recommendation not suitable for promotion at this time. The words were knives, had been knives for 2 years, cutting into him every time he read them. Proof that he wasn't good enough, would never be good enough. That he was failing Emma by being mediocre at the one thing that was supposed to provide for her. Victoria closed the red folder and opened the blue one. Actual performance data. Marcus Reynolds error rate, 0.3%. Highest performing technician in company. Productivity, 340% of standard customer satisfaction, 4.9 out of 5.0. Comparative ranking. Comparative ranking exceeds all 15 key performance indicators. Marcus stared at the numbers. Read them again. Again. They didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. Because if these numbers were real, if this data was accurate, then he wasn't mediocre, wasn't failing, wasn't barely scraping by. He was exceptional. Richard has been falsifying your performance reviews for 2 years. Victoria's words landed like physical blows. Why? His voice broke on the single syllable. 2 years of self-doubt crystallizing into one question that demanded an answer. Victoria leaned forward and something in her expression shifted. Not pity, something harder. Something that looked like rage held under tight control. Because you're good at your job, Marcus. Too good. If corporate leadership saw your real performance numbers, you'd be promoted immediately. You'd be earning what you deserve, making decisions, having authority, and Richard would lose his cash cow. Someone skilled enough to do the work of 4 people without complaining. Someone who believed the lie that he wasn't good enough, so he kept pushing harder, working longer, never asking questions. The truth of it hit Marcus like a freight train. He stood up suddenly, the chair scraping against the floor, and walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. Seattle's lights glittered in the distance, all those people living normal lives where their bosses didn't lie to them, where their hard work was actually recognized, where they didn't sacrifice everything for nothing. How long have you known? The question came out like an accusation because that's what it was. I discovered the anomalies 4 weeks ago. It took 3 weeks to gather irrefutable evidence, legal proof that would stand up to scrutiny. I confronted Richard 2 days ago. And you waited until now to tell me. Marcus spun around and he didn't care that he was yelling at the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company in his own kitchen. Didn't care that she could destroy his career with a phone call. Didn't care about anything except the fact that she'd known for 4 weeks while he'd worked himself to death, thinking he was failing. Victoria flinched but didn't look away, didn't make excuses, just sat there and took it. I needed legal proof before I could act. And Marcus, Richard isn't the only one. This is happening in 4 other departments. 12 employees total being exploited the same way you are. I needed to understand the full scope before I could move. Marcus turned back to the window because looking at her was too hard. Because her explanation made sense and he hated that it made sense. Hated that she'd been protecting the company and other victims while he'd been drowning. Why are you here? His voice came out quieter now, drained of the rage that had been the only thing holding him upright. Why didn't you send HR an email? Have your lawyers handle this? The question hung in the air between them. Marcus heard Victoria stand, heard her footsteps on his cheap linoleum floor, felt her presence beside him at the window, even though she didn't touch him. When I saw your file, when I saw what's been done to you, to realize something. Her voice had gone soft, vulnerable in a way that made Marcus actually turn to look at her. The Ice Queen was gone. Just a woman standing in his kitchen, looking like she was carrying a weight too heavy for one person to bear. You have a daughter, Marcus, a 7-year-old girl who barely sees her father because he's too busy being exploited by my company. And your wife, she passed away 3 years ago. Marcus nodded stiffly, not trusting his voice. You've been raising Emma alone while working yourself to death for people who don't appreciate you. For a system I created, that I allowed to exist through my negligence. Tears were forming in Victoria's eyes now, and Marcus had never seen the Ice Queen cry, had never imagined she was capable of it. I sat in my office last night looking at your address, and I thought about calling, sending an email, having HR schedule a meeting, but none of that felt like enough. She gestured around his modest kitchen, at the dishes she'd washed, at the floors she'd swept, at the coffee maker she'd cleaned. I know this doesn't fix anything. I know showing up here is intrusive and probably crazy, but I needed you to see that I know, that I'm not hiding behind my title or my lawyers, that I'm willing to stand in your kitchen and face what my company has done to you. The sincerity in her voice cracked something open in Marcus's chest. Anger and hope and grief all mixing together into something he couldn't name, couldn't process, could barely survive feeling. Numbers don't show you a man collapsing on his couch every night because he's too exhausted to put his daughter to bed properly. They don't show you someone skipping meals because they're not sure they can afford groceries and rent in the same week. Victoria's words painted a picture of his life with uncomfortable accuracy, made him wonder how much research she'd done, how deeply she'd looked into the wreckage Richard's lies had created. Marcus wanted to hate her, wanted to blame her for all of it because she was the CEO and the buck stopped with her. But the woman standing in his kitchen wasn't some untouchable corporate executive. She was human, flawed, trying desperately to fix something she'd broken through negligence rather than malice. "I don't need your pity." The words came out quiet but firm, a line in the sand. "Good, because I'm not offering pity, I'm offering respect and a partnership." Victoria stepped closer, and Marcus could see the exhaustion written into every line of her face, could see someone who'd been awake for days trying to untangle a mess of her own making. "You know this company inside and out, Marcus. You know where the problems are because you've lived them. Help me fix this, not just for you, but for everyone else stuck in the same trap." Marcus crossed his arms, a defensive posture he couldn't quite abandon, even as his anger started to fade into something more complicated. "And if I say no, then you say no. I'll still make the changes. Still deal with Richard and anyone else who's been exploiting my employees. Still ensure you're compensated for what was done to you. But it won't be as effective without someone who understands what it's really like down there." She met his eyes, and the honesty in her gaze was almost painful to witness. "I need you, Marcus. The company needs you. And whether you believe it or not, I think you need this too." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, but exhaustion was catching up to him now that the adrenaline was fading. Exhaustion and the crushing weight of 2 years of lies finally being exposed. 2 years of thinking he was failing when he'd been succeeding. 2 years of believing he wasn't enough when he'd been more than enough all along. "I need time to think." Victoria nodded immediately, a relief crossing her features. "Take all the time you need. I'll have the offer sent over. Operations manager position, 95,000 salary, real benefits, 40-hour weeks maximum, no obligation to accept." She moved toward the door, gathering her bag and her discarded heels. But she paused at the threshold, looking back at the photo on his refrigerator. Marcus and Emma at the park last summer. Emma's missing front tooth on full display as she grinned at the camera, both of them laughing at something Marcus couldn't remember anymore. "She looks like you. Same eyes." Marcus felt himself soften despite everything. "People say she has her mother's smile." "I'm sorry for your loss. I can't imagine raising a child alone." The sympathy in Victoria's voice sounded genuine, not performative, not the kind of empty condolence people offered at funerals. "Do you have kids?" "No, no husband, no kids, no life outside work, really." The admission came out matter of fact, but Marcus heard the loneliness underneath it, recognized it because he'd been living with a different kind of loneliness for 3 years, the kind that came from losing your partner and never quite figuring out how to be whole again. "For what it's worth, what you did tonight, coming here, most CEOs wouldn't." Victoria smiled small and sad. "Most CEOs didn't build their company from nothing, didn't start as the underdog. I used to be you, Marcus. I just forgot." The words hung in the air between them, a moment of connection, brief, genuine, human. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her, and Marcus was alone in his kitchen with performance reviews that told two different stories and a job offer that felt too good to be true. He stood there for a long time holding the blue folder with his real performance data, and for the first time in 2 years felt something other than exhausted. He felt hope. 2 in the morning found Marcus sitting at his laptop, the glow of the screen the only light in his living room. Sleep was impossible. His mind kept circling back to Victoria's revelations, to Richard's theft, to 2 years of lies finally exposed. But underneath the anger and shock, a different question was forming. If this had happened to him, how many others were suffering the same way? Marcus logged into the Hayes Technologies employee portal, his fingers moving across the keyboard with purpose. He started cross-referencing data. Who else reported to Richard? What were their work hours? Were there patterns he'd missed because he'd been too focused on surviving each day? He found a forum post from 8 months ago buried in the company's internal message board. Anonymous user. Simple message that Marcus had probably scrolled past a dozen times without really seeing it. "Anyone else in operations working insane hours? Feels like we're short-staffed, but management says the budget is fine." Marcus's heart rate picked up. He created a reply under his own username, not caring about anonymity anymore. I need to talk to you. It's important. More important than you know. He hit send and sat back watching the cursor blink on the screen. No response would come until morning at the earliest, but Marcus felt like he'd just done something. Taken action instead of just absorbing blow after blow. His phone buzzed at 7 a.m., a message from an unknown number. This is Tech Guru 206 from the forum. Got your message. Not sure what this is about, but something in your post felt urgent. Coffee at 8 Pike Street Starbucks. Marcus typed back immediately. I'll be there. The man sitting at the corner table looked young, maybe 29, with the kind of nervous energy that came from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. He wore a Hayes Technologies IT department polo, his laptop bag slung over the back of his chair. Marcus Reynolds. Marcus nodded and sat down his own coffee, already cooling in his hands. Garrett Mitchell, network technician. I posted that forum thing 8 months ago when I was too tired to remember not to complain on company platforms. How many hours are you working? Garrett laughed, but there was no humor in it. 60 a week, 70. I stopped counting. Richard says we're understaffed. Says budget constraints mean we can't hire anyone new. Says if I want to move up, I need to prove I can handle the workload. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. The same script, the same lies, different victim. What if I told you Richard's been lying, that there's no budget constraint, that he's been reporting phantom employees and pocketing their salaries while making you do their work? Garrett's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. That's insane. You're saying Richard's been stealing? Marcus pulled out the printouts Victoria had given him, showed Garrett the phantom employees, the bank accounts, the payroll fraud spanning 2 years. Holy hell. Garrett set his cup down with shaking hands. I thought I was going crazy. Thought I just wasn't good enough, wasn't fast enough. My wife keeps asking why I'm never home, and I don't have a good answer except that I'm always behind, and if I don't catch up, I'll get fired. You're not behind. You're doing the work of multiple people, just like I was. Marcus leaned forward, keeping his voice low, even though the coffee shop was mostly empty. The CEO found out 2 days ago. She came to my house last night to tell me. But I need to know how many others there are. Richard supervised 12 people, according to Victoria. I need to find them. Garrett's eyes widened. Victoria Hayes came to your house, the Ice Queen herself. She's not what people think. The words came out defensive, surprising Marcus with their vehemence. He barely knew Victoria, had spent one conversation with her, but something about the way she'd stood in his kitchen, vulnerable and honest, and taking a responsibility for failures that weren't entirely her fault, made him want to defend her. Garrett was looking at him strangely, but he didn't comment on Marcus's tone. I know 3 other guys in operations. We grab beers sometimes and complain about the hours. If this is real, if Richard's been doing this to all of us, can you get them together somewhere off company property? My buddy Dex owns a garage in Georgetown, Sullivan's Auto. We could meet there tonight. Marcus nodded, feeling pieces of a plan starting to form. Victoria had evidence, had started the investigation, but she was working from the top down through official channels and legal processes. Marcus could work from the bottom up, could find the other victims, could give them the truth they deserved. Tonight, 7 p.m., tell them it's important, but don't give details over company email. Garrett stood, shaking Marcus's hand with the kind of grip that came from genuine gratitude. I don't know what you're doing, but thank you for not staying quiet, for giving a damn. Sullivan's Auto occupied a corner lot in Georgetown, the kind of place that looked like it had been there since the 50s and would probably outlast the gentrification creeping through Seattle's industrial neighborhoods. The bay doors were closed when Marcus arrived, but he could see light spilling from underneath and hear the sound of voices inside. Dexter Sullivan answered his knock, a man in his mid-40s with grease-stained hands and the kind of face that had seen hard years but hadn't lost its capacity for warmth. Former Navy mechanic like Marcus. They'd served at different times, different ships, but there was a kinship in shared experience. Dex had opened this garage after his discharge, built it into something solid through sheer determination and skill. Reynolds, Garrett said you needed the space for something important. Marcus stepped inside, seeing Garrett and 3 other men standing around a workbench that had been cleared of tools. All of them wore the same expression. Exhaustion mixed with curiosity, mixed with the kind of hope people develop when they're drowning and someone throws them a rope. Everyone here works under Richard Holloway. Nods all around. Marcus took a breath and started talking. Told them about Victoria's visit, about the phantom employees, about 2 years of systematic fraud, about falsified performance reviews and stolen wages and a system designed to exploit them while making them believe they were the problem. By the time he finished, the garage was silent except for the hum of the space heater in the corner. A man Marcus didn't know spoke first, his voice rough with anger. "You're telling me I missed my kid's birth because I was covering an emergency call that Richard created, because some fake employee needed to justify overtime that was going into Richard's pocket? That's exactly what I'm telling you." Marcus met each man's eyes in turn. "Victoria's handling this through legal channels. She's building a case. But we can help. We can document our own experiences. Pull records that show the reality of what we've been going through. Give her ammunition she can use to make sure this never happens again." Garrett spoke up from his position, leaning against a toolbox. "That sounds a lot like we'd be accessing company systems, going through data we might not technically have clearance for. We'd be using our own credentials to check our own time records, our own work orders, our own performance data. Nothing illegal about an employee verifying their own information." Dex laughed, the sound echoing in the garage. "That's some creative interpretation to Policy Reynolds." "You got a better idea," Silence answered him. Then one by one the men started nodding. "I'm in," Garrett said. "I can pull system logs, time clock data, work order modifications. Anything digital leaves a trail and I know where to look." "I can get the physical paperwork," another man offered. "Maintenance request equipment, requisitions, all the stuff Richard signed off on that never quite added up." Marcus felt something shift in the room. Felt these men who'd been isolated in their suffering, each thinking they were the only ones struggling, suddenly becoming a team. A force. Something that could push back against the system that had been crushing them. "We do this carefully," Marcus said. "We document everything. We back up files. We give Victoria Hayes the evidence she needs to burn Richard's whole operation to the ground." "And then what?" Dex asked. "Say we expose Richard. Say we prove the fraud. What's to stop the next manager from pulling the same scam? What's to stop this from happening again in a different department?" The question hit at the heart of something Marcus had been thinking about since Victoria left his apartment. Exposing Richard was important. Getting justice for the 12 victims was critical. But if the system allowed this to happen in the first place, if there were no safeguards, no oversight, no way for employees to report abuse without fear of retaliation, then they were just putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Then we help Victoria fix the system. We tell her what needs to change from the ground level. Not just policies on paper, but real mechanisms that protect people. The men exchanged glances. Marcus could see the skepticism, the doubt, the lifetime of experience that taught them CEOs didn't actually care about workers on the bottom rung. "She came to my house," Marcus said quietly. "At 11 at night. She could have sent an email. Could have had HR handle everything. But she showed up in person because she wanted me to know she wasn't hiding behind her title, that she was willing to face what her company had done." "Maybe she's just good at PR," someone muttered. "Maybe. Or maybe she actually gives a damn, and we're so used to being screwed over that we can't recognize someone trying to help when they show up." That shut down the objections. The men got to work, each taking responsibility for different pieces of the puzzle. Garrett set up his laptop and started diving into server logs. Others made lists of suspicious work orders, phantom emergencies, equipment purchases that never arrived. Marcus watched them work and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The sense that what he was doing mattered, that he was part of something bigger than just surviving one shift at a time. His phone buzzed, a text from Beth. "Emma keeps asking when you're coming to get her. I told her tomorrow morning, but she's worried about you. Says you sounded sad on the phone." Marcus typed back quickly. "Tell her I'm okay. Tell her Daddy's fighting to make things better." 3 hours later, they had everything. Time clock manipulations showing systematic deletion of overtime hours. Work orders that had been modified after completion to make productivity look lower. Equipment requisition forms for tools that were never delivered but were charged to the budget anyway. Emergency maintenance calls created out of thin air to justify Richard's own overtime, while his crew handled the fake crises. Garrett transferred everything to 3 separate USB drives, encrypted, backed up, impossible to deny. This is enough to bury him, Garrett said, holding up one of the drives. Question is, what do we do with it? Marcus took the drive, feeling the weight of it in his palm. Such a small thing, but it held the evidence of 2 years of systematic theft and exploitation. 2 years of lies finally exposed in irrefutable data. I give it to Victoria. Let her use it however she needs to make the case. You trust her that much? Marcus thought about the woman in his kitchen, the tears in her eyes, the way her voice had broken when she talked about the employees she'd failed, the way she'd washed his dishes like she was trying to physically clean away the guilt. Yeah, I think I do. Monday morning, Marcus walked into Hayes Technologies with the USB drive in his pocket and a purpose in his stride that had been absent for 2 years. He didn't stop at his locker, didn't check in with the shift supervisor, walked straight to the executive floor where Richard Holloway's office occupied a corner with windows overlooking the city. Richard was at his desk, gray hair, perfectly styled belly, straining against his button-down shirt, face buried in his computer screen. He looked up when Marcus knocked, surprise flickering across his features before being replaced with his usual condescending smile. "Reynolds, what are you doing up here? Shouldn't you be on the floor?" Marcus stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Set the USB drive on Richard's desk like he was playing a trump card in a poker game he'd been losing for 2 years. "I want to talk about phantom employees." The color drained from Richard's face so fast Marcus thought the man might pass out. But he recovered quickly. Corporate instincts kicking in, plastering on a confused expression that might have been convincing if Marcus hadn't spent 3 hours the night before looking at proof of his crimes. "I don't know what you're talking about." Marcus opened his laptop, which he'd brought specifically for this moment, pulled up the files Garrett had extracted, projected them onto Richard's own monitor. Employee ID 4782, Rebecca Foster, hired 18 months ago. Salary $47,000 annually. Bank deposits. Wells Fargo account 8291, account holder. Richard Holloway. Rebecca Foster doesn't exist, but the money going into your account sure does. Richard stood up fast enough that his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "Where did you get that?" "That's confidential financial information. You're not authorized. Victoria Hayes gave it to me. She's been investigating you for a month. But I didn't come here to talk about what she knows." Marcus pulled up the next screen. Time clock data showing systematic deletions of overtime. Work orders modified after the fact. Equipment purchases that disappeared into thin air. "I came to show you what I know. What 11 other people you have been exploiting know. We've documented everything, Richard. Every lease sheet, every manipulation, every dollar you stole." The mask dropped completely. Richard's face twisted with rage, all pretense of confusion abandoned. "You don't know what you're doing, Reynolds. I've been here 8 years. I have allies, connections, people who owe me favors. One word from me, and you'll never work in this industry again." Marcus stood slowly, deliberately, making sure Richard could see he wasn't intimidated, wasn't backing down. Wasn't the same broken man who'd believed for 2 years that he was failing. "You stole from me, from my daughter. You made me think I was failing when I was actually exceeding every metric. You destroyed my confidence, my health, my time with my kid. That's over." He leaned forward, hands flat on Richard's desk. "You've already done your worst. For 2 years you've been doing your worst, and I survived it. So go ahead, make your threats, call your allies, try to blacklist me. I'm done being afraid of you." Marcus walked out before Richard could respond, leaving the USB drive on the desk like evidence at a crime scene. His hands were shaking, but his head was high. For the first time in 2 years, he'd stood up to the man who'd been destroying him, had looked Richard Holloway in the eye and refused to back down. He made it to the elevator before his phone rang. Victoria's name on the screen. "Marcus, what did you do?" "Richard just stormed into my office demanding I fire you for harassment and unauthorized access to company files." Marcus couldn't help the smile that spread across his face. "I confronted him, showed him the evidence, told him we know everything." Silence on the other end of the line. Then a sound that might have been a laugh. or might have been exasperation. Possibly both. Get up here, now, and bring whatever evidence you have. Marcus found Victoria in her office with a full legal team assembled. 3 lawyers in expensive suits faces severe taking notes as Richard paced and ranted about insubordination and corporate espionage and employees who didn't know their place. The moment Marcus walked in, Richard's voice got louder. They're arrest him. He hacked company servers, stole confidential information. This is industrial espionage. Victoria held up one hand and Richard actually stopped talking. The Ice Queen was back, and Marcus understood now why people feared her. There was steel in her spine and ice in her voice. "Mr. Holloway, sit down." Richard sat. Victoria turned to Marcus. "Show me what you have." Marcus connected his laptop to the conference room screen and walked them through everything. The time clock manipulations, the work order modifications, the equipment fraud, the systematic exploitation of 12 employees over 2 years, while Richard pocketed nearly $300,000. The lawyers took notes, asked questions, cross-referenced data with the investigation Victoria had already conducted. By the time Marcus finished, Richard had gone pale again, all his bluster deflated. One of the lawyers spoke up, her voice professionally neutral. "Mr. Holloway, based on this evidence, in our independent investigation, we're prepared to recommend immediate termination for cause. Additionally, the company will be filing a criminal complaint with the Seattle Police Department for fraud and embezzlement." "You can't do this. I have a contract. I have rights." Victoria stood, and something in her expression made even the lawyers go quiet. "You have the right to legal representation. You have the right to due process. What you don't have is the right to steal from my company and exploit my employees." She nodded to her head of security, a former police officer who'd been standing quietly by the door. "Escort Mr. Holloway from the building. Remote wipe his laptop and phone. He's suspended pending the completion of our investigation." Richard was still protesting as security let him out, but his voice had lost its power. He was just a man who'd gotten caught and was facing the consequences of 2 years of systematic theft. When the door closed behind him, Victoria sank into her chair like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. "That was either the bravest thing you've ever done or the most foolish." Marcus couldn't quite tell if she was angry or impressed. "Had to be done." He was never going to stop unless someone stood up to him. "You could have gotten yourself fired or arrested if Richard's accusations had any merit. But they didn't, because what we did was legal. What he did wasn't." Victoria looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Respect maybe, or recognition, like she was seeing him as something other than a victim for the first time. "I want you to work with me, not just take the operations manager position. I want you directly involved in the reforms, every policy change, every new oversight mechanism, every protection we put in place. I want your input." Marcus felt the offer land like a physical thing. This was more than a job, more than a promotion. This was a partnership, a chance to actually fix the system that had broken him. "Why me? You've got consultants, experts, people with degrees and experience. Because you lived it, because you know what it's really like, because you're willing to fight even when it's hard, because you confronted Richard this morning when you could have just taken your settlement and walked away, because you found the other victims and organized them and built a case, even though no one asked you to." Victoria stood and walked around her desk until she was facing him directly. "I need someone who cares about fixing this, not someone who cares about their resume or their bonus or their career trajectory. And I think that's you." Marcus thought about Emma, about the 2 years he'd lost with her because he'd been too exhausted to be present, about all the other parents in all the other departments who were missing their kids' lives because systems like Richard's were allowed to exist. "I'm in, but I want something in return." "Name it." "I want the other 11 victims involved too, not just me. They deserve to be part of building something better." Victoria smiled, and it transformed her face, made her look younger, less like the Ice Queen and more like the woman who'd stood in his kitchen trying to make amends. "Partners." Marcus shook her hand, feeling the firmness of her grip, the certainty in it. "Partners." 3 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork and learning curves steep enough to give Marcus vertigo. The operations manager office felt foreign wrong, like wearing someone else's clothes that didn't quite fit. Dual monitors glowed with spreadsheets he barely understood. His desk phone had an extension that rang with questions he didn't always know how to answer. Business cards arrived with his name printed in clean sans serif font, mocking him every time he looked at them. Marcus Reynolds, operations manager. The voice in his head wouldn't shut up. Imposter, fraud. They'll figure out you're just a mechanic playing dress-up in a corner office. His first major decision cost the company $3,000. He'd approved overtime for a crew without routing it through finance first, bypassing protocols he hadn't known existed. The rejection email arrived within an hour, CCing Victoria and half the accounting department. Heat had crawled up Marcus's neck as he read the formal reprimand, couched in corporate speak, about proper authorization chains and budgetary controls. The second mistake came 2 days later when he tried to hire an additional technician without securing budget approval from the quarterly planning committee. The HR director called him personally, voice dripping with the kind of patience people reserve for children and idiots. "Mr. Reynolds, we have processes for headcount requests. You can't just decide we need another body and start posting job listings." Marcus had apologized, hung up, and stared at his monitors, wondering how people survived in environments where doing the right thing required 15 signatures and a committee vote. By the end of week 1, he'd sent an email to the entire company announcing a safety protocol change without running it past communications first. That one earned him a personal visit from the PR director, a severe woman named Sheila, who explained in excruciating detail why company-wide announcements needed media training and legal review. What if your email had created liability? What if it contradicted our insurance policies? What if reporters had picked it up and misconstrued your intent? "I was trying to keep people safe." Sheila's expression suggested this was the wrong answer. Intent doesn't matter if the execution creates problems we can't control. Victoria called him to her office at 7 that evening. Marcus trudged up to the executive floor expecting to be fired, demoted, or worse, pitied. Instead, he found her sitting on the floor of her office, surrounded by policy manuals and procedural documents, her expensive suit jacket discarded over a chair, her hair escaping its usual tight constraints. "Sit." Marcus sat on the floor across from her because the informality of it felt less intimidating than perching in one of her guest chairs while she lectured him about his failures. "Your first week was a disaster." "I know." "Good. Self-awareness is the first step." Victoria pushed a 3-ring binder toward him. Approval workflows, authorization matrices, communication protocols, budgetary thresholds. The bureaucratic machinery that kept a corporation running without descending into chaos. "You can't just approve things because they're right, Marcus. You have to navigate the system, understand the channels, know who needs to sign off before you move." Frustration bubbled up hot and bitter. "The system is what let Richard steal for 2 years. The system is what kept me working 80-hour weeks while everyone looked the other way. Now you're telling me I have to work within it." "Yes, because until we change it, trying to operate outside, it just creates chaos. We work within the framework while we build something better. We use the rules to rewrite the rules." Marcus wanted to argue, but exhaustion won out. He'd spent 12 years in the Navy where following procedures was gospel. Somehow he'd forgotten that lesson in civilian life. Or maybe he'd just been too tired to care about anything except surviving each shift. "Show me how." Victoria's expression softened into something that might have been approval. She pulled out a laptop and walked him through every mistake he'd made that week, showing him the proper workflow for each decision, the forms that needed filing, the people who needed notification, the approval chains that turned simple choices into multi-day processes. "In the military, I just did the job. Nobody needed 3 signatures to replace a compressor. The military has different accountability structures, different command hierarchies. Corporate America runs on covering your ass and distributing liability. Welcome to middle management, where 80% of your time is paperwork and 20% is actual work." Marcus laughed despite himself, the sound surprising them both. "I preferred 100% fixing broken things." "Too late. You're in the office trap now, no escape." The easy banter caught him off guard, made him see Victoria as something other than the CEO who'd upended his life. Just a woman who probably made her own share of mistakes climbing the ladder, who understood what it meant to feel out of place in a role that didn't quite fit. They worked until past 10, Victoria drilling him on approval processes until Marcus's head spun with org charts and decision trees. She ordered Thai food from a place that delivered late, and they ate it straight from the containers while going over budget allocation procedures. You're being patient with me. You think so. Most people find me terrifying. You are terrifying, but you're also trying to help. Victoria set down her pad thai and looked at him directly, something shifting in her expression. I don't want you to fail, Marcus. I need you to succeed. Not just for the company, but because if you can't make this transition, it proves the system is too broken to fix from the inside. The weight of that statement settled between them. Marcus was more than an employee being promoted. He was a test case, proof of concept, evidence that people from the bottom could rise up and change things if given the chance. No pressure then, immense pressure. But I think you can handle it. Marcus drove home that night with his head full of procedures and his chest full of something that felt dangerously like belonging. Saturday afternoon found Marcus at Pike Place Market with Emma watching his daughter weave between vendor stalls with the kind of energy only 7-year-olds possessed. She'd been staying with Betham all week while Marcus adjusted to his new schedule. And guilt sat heavy in his chest every time he looked at her. New job or not, he was still missing her life in increments of hours that added up to days. Emma stopped at a flower vendor, her small hands reaching toward a bouquet of sunflowers taller than she was. Can we get flowers for Aunt Beth? She let me make cookies, and I got flour everywhere, and she didn't even get mad. Marcus handed over $10 and watched Emma carefully select 3 sunflowers, her face serious with concentration. His phone buzzed, a text from Beth. Emma keeps asking about the nice lady from work who helped you. When were you planning to mention you've been spending late nights with the CEO? Marcus's face heated even though no one could see him. He typed back quickly. It's not like that. She's helping me learn the job. Sure, and I'm the Queen of England. Emma wants to meet her. Says you smile different when you talk about her. Marcus looked at his daughter arranging sunflowers in her arms and felt his carefully constructed boundaries starting to crack. Emma was too perceptive, too smart. She'd noticed things Marcus had been trying not to notice himself. The way his pulse kicked up when Victoria's name appeared on his phone. The way he found excuses to stop by her office with questions that could have been emails. The way she laughed at his terrible jokes about corporate bureaucracy and made him feel clever instead of foolish. He made a decision that was probably stupid but felt necessary. Victoria, it's Marcus. I know this is weird, but Emma's been asking about you. Would you want to get coffee with both of us? Nothing formal, just... He trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence without making it sound like something it wasn't. Or maybe couldn't be or shouldn't be, but he was starting to want anyway. Victoria's response came after a pause long enough to make Marcus regret calling. Coffee with Emma. That sounds... I'd like that. Yes. Relief and anxiety hit simultaneously. Pike Place Cafe. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. I'll be there. Marcus hung up and looked at Emma, who was watching him with eyes that saw too much. The nice lady wants to meet you. Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really, can I wear my butterfly dress? The purple one Mommy got me. The casual mention of Sarah hit Marcus like it always did, a sharp ache that had dulled over 3 years, but never quite disappeared. Emma talked about her mother in present tense sometimes as if Sarah was just away on a trip, instead of buried in a cemetery 20 minutes from their apartment. You can wear whatever you want, sweetheart. Emma spent the rest of Saturday practicing what she'd say to Victoria. Marcus listened to her rehearse introductions in the bathroom mirror and wondered what the hell he was doing, bringing his daughter into the complicated mess of his professional and increasingly unprofessional feelings about his boss. Victoria arrived at Pike Place Cafe at exactly 2 o'clock, and Marcus barely recognized her. Jeans that looked soft and worn instead of pressed and perfect. A cream-colored sweater that made her look approachable instead of untouchable. Hair falling loose past her shoulders in waves Marcus had never seen, because she always wore it pinned up tight. Emma spotted her first and waved with both hands like she was flagging down a rescue plane. You're really pretty. Daddy said you were nice, but he didn't say pretty. Marcus wanted the earth to open up and swallow him. Victoria's laugh saved him, genuine and warm, and nothing like the controlled professional sound he had heard in meetings. "Thank you, Emma. You're pretty too. I love your dress. Are those butterflies?" "Magic butterflies. They're different from regular butterflies because they grant wishes, but only if you're really, really nice." Victoria sat down across from them, and Marcus watched something in her posture shift. The corporate armor fell away completely, replaced by genuine curiosity, as Emma launched into an explanation of the difference between magic butterflies and regular butterflies that involved a complicated mythology Emma had apparently been developing for months. "So the magic ones live in the rainbow forest, and they only come out when kids are being brave." "Exactly. Did your mommy tell you about them too?" A shadow crossed Victoria's face so quick Marcus almost missed it. "No, sweetheart. My mom wasn't really the storytelling type." Emma considered this with the seriousness of a child who couldn't imagine a childhood without stories. "That's sad. Stories are important. Daddy tells me stories every night. Well, he used to, before he got so tired." The observation landed like an accusation, even though Emma's tone held no judgment. Just a 7-year-old stating facts she'd learned to accept. Marcus felt Victoria's eyes on him but couldn't meet her gaze. "Your dad's been working very hard, but that's going to change now. He won't be so tired anymore." "That's what he says, but grown-ups say lots of things." The casual cynicism from someone so young made Victoria's expression crack into something raw. She reached across the table and took Emma's hand with a gentleness that surprised Marcus. "I promise we're going to make things better. For your dad and for lots of other people too." Emma studied Victoria's face like she was searching for lies, then nodded. "Okay, I believe you. You have kind eyes." They spent the next hour drawing on napkins. Emma showed Victoria how to shade butterfly wings with the side of a pencil. Victoria taught Emma a technique for drawing perfect circles she'd learned in an art class years ago. Marcus watched them together and felt something dangerous blooming in his chest. Something that looked like family, like belonging, like a future he'd stopped letting himself imagine after Sarah died. Emma needed the bathroom and skipped off with explicit instructions not to talk to strangers. The moment she was out of earshot, Victoria's composure crumbled slightly. "She's incredible. You're raising an amazing kid." "Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping us afloat." "That's parenting, or so I imagine. I wouldn't know." The loneliness in Victoria's voice made Marcus look at her fully. Really see her, a woman who'd sacrificed everything for a company that was supposed to mean something. Who'd woken up one day and realized she'd built a prison of her own making. Who was sitting in a coffee shop drawing butterflies with a 7-year-old and looking more alive than Marcus had ever seen her. "Emma asked me something this morning." Victoria's attention sharpened. "She asked if you were going to be her new mom." The words hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Victoria's hands stilled on the napkin she'd been doodling on. "What did you tell her?" "I told her families come in lots of different shapes. That sometimes people who aren't related by blood can still care about each other." "That's diplomatic." Marcus leaned forward, keeping his voice low even though the cafe was loud enough to drown them out. "She's already attached to you, after one coffee date. And I need you to know that if this, whatever this is between us, if it goes wrong, it won't just hurt me. It'll hurt her. And I won't let her get hurt again." Victoria met his eyes and he saw fear there. Real, genuine fear. "I don't know how to do this, any of this. I've never had a relationship that lasted longer than 3 months. I work 80 hours a week. I don't know how to be someone's anything." "Neither do I. Not since Sarah died." They sat in that honesty for a moment, two people who were disasters at relationships for completely different reasons, connected by a 7-year-old who believed in magic butterflies and second chances. Emma returned with a cookie the size of her head that some kind stranger had apparently given her, and the moment of vulnerability passed. But Marcus felt it lingering between them for the rest of the afternoon as Emma chattered about school and showed Victoria pictures on Marcus's phone of her science fair project that had explosively failed in front of the entire class. Victoria laughed at the photos, and Marcus committed the sound to memory, filed it away as evidence that the Ice Queen was a myth, that underneath the corporate armor was someone warm and real and capable of joy. They walked Emma to Marcus's truck afterward, and she hugged Victoria with the unself-conscious affection of childhood. "Can you come to our house next time I have way more crayons there?" Victoria looked at Marcus, a question in her eyes. He nodded. I'd love to, Emma. Driving away, Marcus caught Emma's reflection in the rearview mirror. She was smiling at her napkin drawing, and something in his chest settled into place. A decision made without words. A line crossed without stepping. This was going to get complicated. But maybe complicated was worth it. Monday morning, Marcus arrived at work to find his phone exploded with notifications. 53 text messages, 27 missed calls. His inbox flooded with emails from colleagues, reporters, numbers he didn't recognize. Beth's name topped the call list. He dialed back immediately. Turn on the news, now. Marcus pulled up Como 4 on his phone and his stomach dropped through the floor. The reporter stood outside Hayes Technologies' main entrance, protesters already gathering behind her, with signs demanding justice and accountability. The ticker running across the bottom of the screen made his blood run cold. Breaking: Hayes Technologies accused of systematic employee exploitation. Internal documents leaked. The reporter's voice cut through the buzz in Marcus's ears. Sources have provided Como 4 with internal audit reports showing that Operations Director Richard Holloway allegedly created phantom employees, embezzled nearly $300,000, and falsified performance reviews to cover his tracks. The question now facing CEO Victoria Hayes: what did she know, and when did she know it? Marcus's hands shook as he scrolled through his messages. Reporters requesting interviews. Co-workers asking if the news was true. Anonymous numbers offering money for his story. The carefully controlled investigation Victoria had been running through legal channels had just exploded into the public sphere. His phone rang. Victoria's name. Don't talk to anyone. Don't comment. Don't confirm or deny. I'm sending a car to pick you up. We're going into crisis mode. The car arrived within 15 minutes, a town car with tinted windows that felt ridiculous and necessary in equal measure. Marcus climbed into the back seat, feeling like a criminal being transported to trial. Hayes Technologies' lobby looked like a war zone. Security had cordoned off the entrance, where protesters shouted about corporate greed and worker exploitation. News vans filled the parking lot, satellite dishes pointed at the building like weapons. Marcus slipped in through the loading dock, guided by security to a service elevator that bypassed the chaos. The executive conference room held Victoria, 3 lawyers Marcus recognized from the Richard confrontation, and a PR director who looked like she hadn't slept in days. Everyone turned when he entered, and Marcus felt the weight of their scrutiny like a physical thing. Who leaked? Victoria's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She stood at the head of the table, still in her Ice Queen armor, no trace of the woman who'd drawn butterflies with Emmy visible in her rigid posture. One of the lawyers, a severe woman named Patricia, pulled up documents on the screen. The leaked materials match our internal audit reports almost exactly. Whoever provided them to the press had access to materials that should have been restricted to this room and the investigation team. So we have a mole, or someone who thinks transparency is more important than corporate liability. Patricia's tone suggested she had opinions about which was worse. The PR director, Sheila, jumped in with the kind of energy that came from multiple espressos and impending disaster. We need to get ahead of this. Issue a statement. Control the narrative before it controls us. One of the lawyers immediately objected. Any statement that confirms the allegations. We stay silent, let our lawyers handle this through proper channels. Silence makes us look guilty, like we're hiding something. We're protecting the company from liability exposure. That's our job. Voices started overlapping, lawyers and PR fighting for control of the response strategy. Marcus watched Victoria's face go from controlled to barely restrained as the arguing escalated. Enough. The single word cut through the chaos. Everyone went silent. Victoria straightened to her full height, and Marcus saw the woman who'd built a company from nothing, who'd fired people without blinking, who commanded respect through sheer force of will. We release a statement, full transparency. Victoria, that increases our legal exposure. I don't care. Her voice had gone cold. Final. We did wrong. We're fixing it. That's the truth. That's what we're going to say. Sheila leaned forward, her PR instincts kicking into overdrive. We could position this as new leadership cleaning house, make you the hero who discovered the problem and took action. Turn the narrative to your favor. No, Ian. Victoria's response was immediate and sharp. I'm not the hero. I enabled this by not paying attention. We tell the truth. We failed our employees. We're making it right. No spin, no clever framing, just honesty. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Admiration mixed with fear, mixed with a desperate hope that honesty would be enough. That transparency could save them from the storm gathering outside. Patricia pulled up polling data focus group research scenario modeling. The truth might not be enough. Shareholders are already calling for your resignation. The stock dropped 4% in the first hour of trading. If we admit fault without a strong counter-narrative, you could lose your position. Then I lose my position. Victoria said it like she was commenting on the weather. Like her entire life's work wasn't on the line. I'd rather lose the company than lose myself to protecting it. Marcus heard echoes of their conversation in her kitchen. About building something that mattered. About remembering why she started. He stood up before he could second-guess the impulse. Victoria's right. All eyes turned to him. He felt like an imposter again, but pushed through it. Hiding makes it worse. Covering up proves we haven't learned anything. We admit we failed. We show what we're doing to fix it. We prove that companies can change if they're willing to face hard truths. Sheila looked at him like he'd just suggested setting money on fire. That's very idealistic, Mr. Reynolds, but we're dealing with real-world consequences here. Legal liability, stock prices, shareholder lawsuits, and 12 employees who spent 2 years being exploited while everyone looked the other way. They deserve better than corporate spin. The lawyers exchanged glances. Patricia pulled Victoria aside, voice low but urgent enough that Marcus caught fragments. Unprecedented risk, liability exposure, potential criminal charges if this goes wrong. Victoria listened, nodded, then turned back to the room. We're doing a press conference. Today, I'll make a statement, take questions, own what happened, and Marcus is coming with me. Absolutely not. Patricia's objection came fast and firm. Putting an affected employee on stage with you creates massive liability. He could say something off script, could open us up to lawsuits we haven't anticipated. He's part of this story. He deserves to be part of telling it. Victoria looked at Marcus, asking a question without words. He nodded. I'm in. The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. The team spent the next hours crafting statements, anticipating questions, building a framework for honesty that wouldn't create unnecessary legal exposure. Marcus watched Sheila work and grudgingly admitted she was good at her job. She wasn't trying to hide the truth, just present it in a way that acknowledged fault without inviting lawsuits. There was an art to it he hadn't appreciated before. The press room was packed. Every major Seattle outlet, national news stringers, tech industry reporters who'd been covering Hayes Technologies for years. Marcus stood backstage and watched the crowd through a gap in the curtains, his heart hammering against his ribs hard enough to hurt. You don't have to do this. Victoria appeared beside him, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something subtle and expensive that he'd started associating with safety. Yes, I do. Those 12 people need to see that someone's standing up, that we're not hiding. You're braver than you give yourself credit for. Marcus turned to look at her, finding vulnerability in her expression that she only let show when no one else was watching. What if this destroys everything you've built? Then I build something else, something better, something I'm not ashamed of. They called Victoria's name. She straightened her jacket, squared her shoulders, and walked onto the stage with her head high. Marcus followed 2 steps behind, feeling like he was walking into battle without armor. Camera flashes exploded like artillery fire. Microphones bristled from the press section like weapons. Victoria stepped to the podium and the room went silent. 6 weeks ago, I discovered something that fundamentally shook my understanding of the company I built. Hayes Technologies, my company, had been systematically exploiting employees, not through policy, not through intention, but through negligence, through my failure to see what was happening right under my nose. Her voice never wavered, never broke. She laid out the facts with surgical precision. Richard's fraud, the phantom employees, the falsified reviews, the systematic theft of wages and dignity from 12 people who deserve better. I take full responsibility for creating an environment where this could happen. I was so focused on growth, on quarterly earnings, on shareholder value, that I stopped seeing the human cost of my blind spots. She announced the settlements, the policy changes, the independent oversight board, the third-party review process for all future performance evaluations, $4.2 million in back pay and damages, money that would hurt quarterly earnings but was necessary for justice. A reporter's hand shot up the moment Victoria paused. Ms. Hayes, should we expect criminal charges to be filed against you for enabling this fraud? I welcome any investigation, full transparency, and accountability. If prosecutors determine I bear legal responsibility, I'll face those consequences. Who is the man standing beside you? Marcus felt every eye in the room turn to him. His throat went dry. Victoria's voice stayed steady. This is Marcus Reynolds, operations manager at Hayes Technologies and one of the affected employees. He's been instrumental in developing our reform initiatives and ensuring we actually address the root causes of what happened. The same reporter focused on Marcus like a predator, spotting weakness. Mr. Reynolds, how do you feel working for the company that exploited you? Every prepared answer Sheila had drilled into him evaporated. Marcus stepped to his own microphone and spoke from the gut. Angry, betrayed, but also hopeful. What happened to me was wrong. What Victoria is doing about it is right. I'm staying because I believe companies can change if they're willing to face hard truths, and because the best way to honor my coworkers who suffered is to make sure it never happens again. Aren't you afraid of retaliation? Every day. But my daughter is watching. I want her to see that standing up for what's right matters even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The words hung in the air, and Marcus saw a few reporters writing them down verbatim, saw others nodding slightly, saw Victoria's hand grip the podium a little tighter, as if his answer had affected her. More questions came rapid fire, about timelines and accountability and shareholder response. Victoria fielded them with practiced skill, never defensive, never making excuses, just owning the failures and articulating the path forward. When it ended 40 minutes later, the general consensus seemed split. Half the room looked sympathetic. The other half looked like sharks sending blood. Marcus had no idea which reaction would win out in the next news cycle. Backstage, Victoria collapsed into a chair like her strings had been cut. I might have just destroyed my company. Marcus sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Or saved it. Stock's going to tank tomorrow. Probably, but you did the right thing. The right thing might cost me everything. Marcus thought about Emma asking if Victoria was going to be her new mom, about coffee shop drawings and butterfly wishes and all the fragile hope he'd been trying not to build on foundations that felt increasingly unstable. Then we'll figure it out, together. Victoria looked at him, and something passed between them that felt bigger than partnership, bigger than professional respect. Something neither of them was ready to name but couldn't deny anymore. Together. Her phone rang, the board chairwoman. Victoria's expression went carefully neutral as she answered, but Marcus saw fear flash across her features before the corporate mask slammed into place. She walked away to take the call, and Marcus sat alone in an empty backstage room, wondering if he'd just watched a woman commit career suicide in the name of honesty. Wondering if telling the truth was always worth the cost. Wondering what happened next when the right choice destroyed everything you'd built. 2 days after the press conference, Marcus walked into Hayes Technologies to find the lobby transformed into a fortress under siege. Security had tripled. Metal barriers formed corridors, directing employees away from the main entrance, where protesters still gathered, their signs now professionally printed instead of hastily scrawled. The media presence had grown rather than diminished, cameras tracking every person entering or leaving, like the building itself was on trial. Hayes Technologies stock had opened down 18% that morning. Marcus had checked the ticker obsessively during his commute, watching numbers that represented people's retirement accounts and college funds bleed value because Victoria had chosen honesty over self-preservation. The business news channels played clips of the press conference on loop, analysts dissecting every word for signs of weakness, predicting either corporate transformation or total collapse, depending on which expert was speaking. His phone buzzed before he reached the elevator. Victoria's assistant with a message that made his stomach drop. Emergency board meeting in 30 minutes. Ms. Hayes requests your presence. Marcus had never attended a board meeting, didn't know the protocols or politics or how to behave in rooms where decisions worth millions got made by people whose net worth exceeded entire small towns. He rode the elevator to the executive floor, feeling like he was ascending to his own execution. The anteroom outside the board conference room held Victoria and her legal team huddled in urgent conversation. Patricia, the lead attorney, looked like she'd aged 5 years and 2 days. Sheila from PR was conspicuously absent, probably already drafting press releases for multiple scenarios, including Victoria's termination. Victoria saw Marcus and broke away from the lawyers, her corporate armor firmly in place, but cracks showing around the edges. Dark circles shadowed her eyes despite expertly applied makeup. Her hands trembled slightly when she touched his arm, guiding him away from the others. Thomas Whitmore is calling for a vote of no confidence. He's been working the other board members since the press conference, building support to remove me as CEO. Marcus felt the floor tilt beneath him. Can he do that? It's his job. He represents shareholder interests, and right now shareholders are hemorrhaging money because I chose transparency over profit protection. Her voice stayed level, but Marcus heard the fear underneath. This wasn't just about losing a position. Victoria Hayes was Hayes Technologies. The company was her identity, her purpose, the thing she'd sacrificed everything else to build. Without it, she'd be untethered, lost. What do you need from me? Honestly, I don't know. Whitmore wants you gone too, says you're a liability. That having an affected employee this close to the reform process creates legal exposure and conflicts of interest. He's probably right. Marcus's jaw tightened. I don't work for Whitmore. I work for you. Not if he gets his way. If they vote me out, the new CEO will clean house. You'll be the first to go. The boardroom doors opened, and Thomas Whitmore emerged like a general surveying his troops before battle. 68 years old, with the kind of face that had made hard decisions for decades without losing sleep. Gray suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. Rolex that definitely did. He looked at Victoria with something between pity and contempt. Ms. Hayes, Mr. Reynolds, the board is ready. Marcus followed Victoria into a room designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle's skyline. A conference table that could seat 20. Leather chairs that probably cost more than Marcus's truck. 6 board members already seated, their expressions ranging from sympathetic to hostile with nothing in between. Whitmore took his position at the head of the table. This emergency session has been called to address the fallout from Ms. Hayes' press conference 2 days ago. In the 48 hours since she publicly admitted to systemic failures at this company, we've lost over $300 million in market capitalization. Shareholders are threatening lawsuits. Our largest clients are requesting meetings to discuss whether Hayes Technologies can be trusted. And our reputation built over 8 years has been damaged, possibly beyond repair. He turned to Victoria with the expression of a disappointed father. Ms. Hayes, what were you thinking? Victoria stood, refusing to remain seated while being attacked. I was thinking we owed our employees the truth, that hiding behind lawyers and PR spin would make us complicit in covering up systematic abuse, that sometimes doing the right thing costs money. Everything costs money. The question is whether the cost is justified. You chose public confession over damage control, and now we're all paying the price. One of the other board members, a woman Marcus didn't recognize, leaned forward. Ms. Hayes, we understand the moral impulse, but you have a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. Your actions have directly harmed their interest. My actions exposed crimes committed under my watch. Should I have hidden that to protect stock prices? Whitmore slammed his palm on the table, the sound cracking through the room like a gunshot. You should have handled it quietly, settled with the affected employees under NDAs, fired Holloway without fanfare, implemented reforms without admitting culpability. That's how adults manage corporate crises. Patricia tried to intervene, her lawyer instincts kicking in. Mr. Whitmore, Ms. Hayes acted on counsel from legal. Your counsel was to minimize exposure, not broadcast our failures to every media outlet in the country. The room erupted into overlapping arguments, board members choosing sides, lawyers trying to restore order. Marcus sat frozen, watching Victoria's life's work get torn apart by people who measured success in quarterly earnings instead of human cost. Whitmore raised his hand and silence fell instantly. The man knew how to command a room. I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in CEO Victoria Hayes. Given the catastrophic damage her decisions have caused, I move that she be removed from her position effective immediately. Victoria went pale but kept her spine straight. I'd like the opportunity to present my case before any vote. You've presented enough already to the entire world. Then let me present to the people who actually matter. The board that's supposed to govern this company with more wisdom than I apparently possess. The sarcasm in her voice was subtle but cutting. Marcus saw several board members react approval or disapproval, flickering across their faces too quick to categorize. Whitmore considered, then gestured magnanimously. You have 15 minutes. Make them count. Victoria pulled up her presentation on the room's main screen. Dada Marcus had seen her compile over the past 2 weeks, working late into the night while the world outside screamed for her resignation. She clicked to the first slide and her voice shifted into the tone that had probably sold investors on Hayes Technologies 8 years ago. Confident, visionary, unshakable. When I founded Hayes Technologies, I was 23 with $30,000 in a belief that I could build a company where people mattered, where innovation came from treating employees like assets instead of expenses. For the first 5 years, we lived those values. Then we scaled, brought on investors who cared about growth rates, hired executives who optimized for efficiency, and somewhere in that process, I stopped walking the floors, stopped knowing my employees' names, stopped seeing the human beings making my success possible. She advanced to the next slide, showing the audit findings in stark numerical detail. 6 weeks ago, I discovered we'd become exactly what I swore we'd never be, a company that exploited workers while leadership looked the other way. I had a choice: handle it quietly, as Mr. Whitmore suggests, or face it publicly and prove we could change. And look where that's gotten us. Whitmore interrupted. Victoria didn't acknowledge him, just advanced to the next slide, showing data Marcus had helped compile from the 12 affected employees. I chose transparency. Yes, we've lost market value. Yes, we're facing lawsuits. But look at these numbers. Employee retention is up 23% since we announced the reforms. Applications for open positions have increased 340%. Our Glassdoor rating went from 3.2 to 4.7 in 2 weeks. We're being contacted by top talent who previously wouldn't have considered us. Another slide: customer satisfaction metrics, contract renewals, new business inquiries. Our clients aren't fleeing, they're leaning in, because in an industry full of companies that hide their failures, we became the one willing to own ours and fix them. That's not weakness, that's a competitive advantage. Marcus watched board members actually paying attention now instead of just waiting for their turn to attack. Victoria was making a case not based on morality, but on business fundamentals, showing that transparency could be profitable if you were patient enough to let it play out. The stock will recover, lawsuits will settle. What won't recover is our integrity if we prove that honesty gets punished, that executives who do the right thing get fired while those who protect the bottom line get rewarded. She looked directly at Whitmore. You want to remove me? Fine. But first ask yourself what message that sends. To our employees, to our customers, to every other CEO watching to see if courage gets rewarded or destroyed. Whitmore leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Inspiring speech, but speeches don't pay dividends. What about the operational chaos you've created? The whispers that you're romantically involved with an employee you promoted, the appearance of favoritism and conflicts of interest. Marcus felt every eye in the room turn to him. Heat crawled up his neck, but he met Whitmore's gaze without flinching. Mr. Reynolds is here because of his expertise, not because of any personal relationship. Victoria's voice had gone ice cold. He knows this company better than anyone in this room. He's lived the problems we're trying to fix. His insights have shaped every reform we're implementing. And the rumors about your personal involvement are completely irrelevant to his professional qualifications. Whitmore smiled like he'd just won a point. Everything is relevant when it creates the appearance of impropriety. Your judgment is compromised, Ms. Hayes. You've let emotions override business sense. That's exactly why this board needs to act. A woman Marcus had noticed earlier, mid-50s, with steel gray hair and the bearing of someone used to being the smartest person in any room, spoke for the first time. Mr. Whitmore, I've been on this board for 6 years. I've watched us prioritize profit over people repeatedly. I stayed silent because that's how corporate boards operate. Victoria Hayes just made me ashamed of that silence. Whitmore's expression suggested this was a betrayal. Catherine, we've discussed this. You've discussed it. I've listened. Now I'm speaking. Catherine Brennan stood and Marcus recognized her from research he'd done on the board composition. Former HR executive at Microsoft. Reputation for integrity that had cost her advancement in the ruthless tech sector. She joined Hayes Technologies board as a counterweight to the financial hawks, but had apparently been outvoted for years. Ms. Hayes did something unprecedented. She chose values over value. She proved that admitting failure doesn't destroy companies, it builds trust. And you want to fire her for that. I want to protect shareholder interest. By teaching every employee that honesty gets punished, by showing the world we care more about stock prices than human dignity. Catherine looked around the table, making eye contact with each board member. If we vote Victoria out, we prove everything the protesters outside are saying, that corporations exist only to extract value, not create it, that we're exactly as soulless as people fear. Whitmore stood to counter, but Catherine wasn't finished. I move that we retain Victoria Hayes as CEO and give her 12 months to prove her reforms can work. If the financials don't recover in that time, we revisit, but we don't punish courage with termination. The motion hung in the air like a challenge. Whitmore looked genuinely surprised that someone had outmaneuvered him. That's not the motion on the table. Then I'm putting it there. We vote on my motion first. Retain Hayes with a 12-month performance review. All in favor. Marcus watched hands rise. Slowly, reluctantly in some cases. But they rose. 3 board members voting with Catherine. Opposed, 3 hands, including Whitmore's. Everyone turned to the one board member who hadn't voted. A younger man Marcus didn't recognize, maybe early 40s, who'd been silent through the entire meeting. David, you have the deciding vote. The man looked at Victoria for a long moment, then at Marcus, then back to Victoria. I came to this board because Hayes Technologies represented something different. A company that actually cared about culture, about people. We've lost that somehow. Maybe Ms. Hayes can help us find it again. His hand went up, 4-3. Victoria kept her position. Whitmore's face went red, but he nodded curtly. The motion passes. Ms. Hayes remains CEO subject to 12-month review. This meeting is adjourned. Board members filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact with either Victoria or Whitmore. Catherine paused beside Victoria's chair. Don't waste this chance. Prove we were right to trust you. She turned to Marcus, studying him with the kind of assessment that came from decades evaluating talent. Mr. Reynolds, walk with me for a moment. Marcus followed her into the hallway, leaving Victoria with her legal team. Catherine led him to a quiet corner away from the conference room. I've been watching you. How you stood by Victoria during the press conference. How you've handled the transition from technician to manager. How you organized those other employees to document the fraud. Marcus wasn't sure if this was praise or prelude to criticism. You're wasted here, Catherine continued. Not because you're not good at what you do, but because as long as you work for Hayes Technologies, people will question whether your success is merit or favoritism, whether your relationship with Victoria compromises both of you. We don't have a relationship. Catherine's expression suggested she saw right through that denial. Not yet, but you will. And when you do, it'll create exactly the kind of conflict Whitmore was talking about. You deserve better than that. So does Victoria. She pulled a business card from her pocket. I run a mid-sized tech company. We need a director of operations, someone who understands what it's like on the ground. Someone with your integrity and drive. Same salary Victoria's offering plus equity. Completely separate from Hayes Technologies. No conflicts, no whispers. Marcus took the card, his mind racing. Think about it. If you're interested, call me. We can start you in 2 weeks. Catherine walked away, leaving Marcus standing in the hallway holding a business card that felt like a lifeline and a betrayal all at once. When the room emptied, Victoria collapsed into her chair like someone had cut her strings. Marcus moved to her side without thinking, his hand finding her shoulder. You did it. You kept your company. by the thinnest possible margin, 1 vote. If David had gone the other way, but he didn't, you won. Victoria looked up at him, and something in her expression cracked. The corporate armor fell away completely, leaving just a woman who'd been fighting for days without rest and had finally been given permission to stop. I couldn't have done this without you. When Whitmore attacked, when he tried to make you the problem, you just sat there and took it. You didn't defend yourself or make it worse. You trusted me to handle it. Marcus pulled her to her feet, and they stood close enough that he could count her heartbeats and the pulse at her throat. I trust you. Completely. The words carried more weight than he'd intended. More honesty than was probably safe. But watching her fight for her company, for the reforms, for him by extension, had cracked something open in Marcus's chest that he couldn't seal back up. Victoria's hand came up to rest against his chest right over his heart. Marcus, I need to tell you something. Her phone rang. Catherine's name on the screen. The moment shattered. Victoria stepped back, professional distance, reasserting itself like armor, sliding back into place. She answered the call while Marcus tried to get his breathing under control. Catherine, thank you for what you did in there. He couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but watched Victoria's expression shift from gratitude to surprise to something complicated he couldn't name. Yes, I understand. Thank you. I'll be in touch. She hung up and looked at Marcus with an expression that mixed hope and fear in equal measure. Catherine offered you a director of operations at her company. Same salary I'm offering plus equity, completely separate from Hayes Technologies, so there's no conflict of interest concerns. Marcus pulled the business card from his pocket. She already told me. Victoria moved to the windows overlooking Seattle, putting distance between them that felt both necessary and painful. You should take it. Is that what you want, for me to leave? I want you to have options, to not feel trapped by circumstances or obligations, to choose what's best for you and Emma without considering how it affects me or the company. Marcus joined her at the window, both of them staring at the city spread below, rather than looking at each other. And if what's best for us includes you, Victoria's reflection in the glass showed something raw and vulnerable. Then we do it right. We wait. We establish clear boundaries. We let the reforms solidify and the company stabilize. You build your career somewhere no one can question your qualifications. And when enough time has passed that no one can accuse us of impropriety, we revisit what this is. Marcus turned to face her directly, forcing her to meet his eyes. How long? 6 months. A year. However long it takes to do this properly. The rationality of it made Marcus want to argue, even though she was completely right. They weren't two people who could just date casually and see what happened. Emma was already attached. The company was already scrutinizing them. One wrong move could destroy everything they were trying to build. What if you meet someone else in that time? Victoria's laugh came out broken. Marcus, I haven't met anyone who made me feel anything in 8 years. I'm not worried about finding someone else. I'm worried about losing you before we even start. You won't lose me. I'll take Catherine's offer. Build my career somewhere I can't be accused of riding your coattails. And we'll wait, however long it takes to do this right. That's very mature and reasonable. I hate every word of it. Me too. They stood in that honesty for a moment, two people who wanted something they couldn't have, yet choosing responsibility over desire because the stakes were too high to be reckless. Marcus left Victoria's office before he could change his mind, rode the elevator down to the main floor where protesters still chanted and cameras still rolled, walked to his truck and sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. His phone buzzed. A text from Emma via Beth's phone. Daddy, when are you coming home? I made you a drawing of you and Miss Victoria. You both have butterfly wings because you're brave. Marcus stared at the message until his vision blurred. His daughter believed in magic and second chances and grown-ups who kept their promises. He couldn't be reckless with her faith, couldn't risk her getting hurt because he couldn't wait a few months to do things properly. He called Catherine Brennan directly. Mr. Reynolds, I assume Victoria told you about my offer. She did. I'm accepting. When do you want me to start? 2 weeks. That'll give you time to transition your responsibilities at Hayes and get Emma settled with the new schedule. I'll be there. Marcus hung up and sat in his truck watching rain start to fall on Seattle's streets. 2 weeks until he walked away from Hayes Technologies. 2 weeks until he put real distance between himself and Victoria. 2 weeks to prove he could do the right thing even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. 3 months of working at Catherine's company had transformed Marcus in ways he hadn't anticipated. Director of operations with a real team reporting to him. Reasonable hours that let him pick Emma up from school most days. Salary that meant he wasn't choosing between groceries and rent anymore. Catherine was a demanding boss, but fair, pushing him to grow without the chaos that had defined his early weeks at Hayes Technologies. Hayes Technologies had stabilized. The stock recovered most of its losses as the market recognized that transparency hadn't destroyed the company. Richard Holloway was awaiting trial on multiple fraud charges. The other affected employees had received their settlements, and several had joined Marcus in leadership roles elsewhere, taking the lessons learned to new companies. Victoria texted him daily. Professional messages about reform implementation and best practices. But underneath the corporate language, Marcus heard what she wasn't saying. I miss you. This is hard. I'm counting the days. He texted back with the same careful distance, never crossing lines, never admitting that he looked at her messages more than necessary, that he saved the rare photos she sent of company events just to see her face. Emma asked about Victoria constantly. When can we see her again? You said we'd see her when things got less crazy. Marcus had no good answer. Almost 4 months felt like forever to a 7-year-old. Felt like forever to him too. On a Saturday afternoon when Seattle's autumn rain pounded against his windows, Marcus made a decision, picked up his phone before he could second-guess it. Victoria, I know we said we'd wait, but Emma keeps asking about you. Would you want to come to dinner at our place? Nothing romantic, just we miss you. The pause lasted long enough that Marcus thought she'd refuse. I'd love to. When? Tonight Emma's making pasta. Well, helping me make pasta. It'll probably be a disaster. Disasters are my specialty lately. What time? Victoria arrived at 6 with flowers for Emma and wine for Marcus, and a smile that made his chest ache. Emma launched herself at Victoria with a hug that nearly knocked her over, chattering about school and friends and the science project that had finally worked this time. Dinner was chaotic. The pasta was overcooked, and the salad was underdressed, and Emma spilled her juice twice. But Victoria laughed, really laughed. The sound filled Marcus's small apartment with warmth he hadn't felt since Sarah died. After Emma went to bed, Marcus and Victoria sat on the couch with careful space between them, close enough to talk quietly, far enough to maintain the boundaries they'd established. She's incredible. You're raising an amazing kid. Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping it together. Join the club. I thought running a company was hard. Turns out being an actual human is harder. Marcus looked at her, fully taking in the changes nearly 4 months had brought. Less stressed, more rested, like the weight she'd been carrying had lightened just enough to let her breathe. How are things really at the company? Better, the reforms are working. Culture scores are up across every metric. We're actually attracting talent instead of just churning through bodies. It's like we remembered why we exist. And the board, still watching, still waiting for me to fail. But Catherine's been running interference. Turns out having an ally who's willing to fight makes all the difference. She turned to face him, vulnerability replacing the professional mask she usually wore. I've been thinking about us, about this waiting game we're playing. Marcus's heart rate kicked up. And it's been almost 4 months since we decided to do this the right way. Since you left Hayes Technologies. Since we established boundaries and proved we could maintain them. Are you keeping track down to the day? The admission hung between them like a confession. Marcus felt something shift, the careful distance they'd maintained, starting to crack under the weight of honesty. Emma asked me something this morning. Victoria's attention sharpened. She asked if you were going to be part of our family, if the waiting was over. What did you tell her? Marcus reached for Victoria's hand, the first intentional touch in months. Her fingers laced through his like they'd been waiting for permission. I told her I hope so, that some things are worth waiting for, that doing things right takes time, but the result is stronger for it. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I've never been good at relationships. I work too much. I'm bad at communicating feelings. I'll probably mess this up. I haven't dated since my wife died. I have no idea how to introduce someone new into Emma's life without it feeling like I'm replacing her mother. And I definitely do not know how to navigate dating my former CEO without everyone thinking it's some kind of power play. We're a disaster waiting to happen. Absolutely. So what do we do? Marcus pulled her closer, closing the distance they'd maintained for months of careful professionalism and denied desire. We try anyway. We take it slow. We protect Emma. We keep things quiet until we're sure. And we trust that maybe, just maybe, we're both brave enough to risk it. Victoria leaned in until their foreheads touched. I'm all in, cared but all in. The kiss started gentle, tentative, testing boundaries they'd finally been given permission to cross. Then Victoria's hand came up to cup his face and Marcus pulled her closer, and gentle became something more. Something that tasted like hope and fear and months of wanting. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Victoria laughed through tears. I've been waiting to do that since you confronted Richard in his office. You were so angry and brave and completely unwilling to back down. I fell a little bit in love with you right then. I've been waiting since you stood in my kitchen owning your failures. Most powerful person I'd ever met, and you were washing my dishes like you were trying to clean away the guilt. They kissed again, mommed this time, building something instead of releasing pressure, a beginning instead of an ending. 18 months after the press conference that nearly destroyed Victoria's career, Marcus sat in the audience at a tech industry conference in San Francisco, watching her present on a panel about corporate reform and ethical leadership. She'd been invited as a case study, proof that transparency could work if you were brave enough to try it. 18 months ago, I made the hardest decision of my career. I chose to publicly admit that my company had systematically failed its employees. The stock tanked, shareholders threatened lawsuits. My board almost fired me. She paused, making eye contact with various audience members. Today, Hayes Technologies is ranked number 3 in the nation for workplace culture. Our revenue is up 34% year over year. We're attracting the best talent in the industry. And it's because we proved that doing the right thing, even when it's expensive, builds trust that translates to business success. The moderator jumped in. You've been very public about your relationship with Marcus Reynolds, who's here today. How do you respond to critics who say that relationship represents a conflict of interest? Victoria smiled and Marcus saw confidence instead of defensiveness. Marcus left Hayes Technologies 14 months before we started dating. He built his career at another company completely independent of mine. We waited until there were no power dynamics, no corporate policies being violated, no legitimate concerns about impropriety. And you're not worried about the optics. I'm done worrying about optics over substance. Marcus and I are both adults. We're both professionals. And yes, we're in a relationship. That doesn't diminish either of our achievements or compromise our integrity. Applause rippled through the audience. After the panel, reporters swarmed Victoria with questions, but she navigated them with the ease of someone who'd learned to handle crisis with honesty instead of evasion. Marcus met her backstage, and she kissed him without hesitation. Public, unashamed, claiming what they'd built through patience and sacrifice. That was incredible. You owned that room. I had good motivation, knew you were watching. They walked back to their hotel, San Francisco's evening fog rolling in from the bay. Marcus pulled Victoria into an alcove between buildings sheltered from the crowds and cameras. I have something to ask you. He knelt on concrete, still warm from the day's sun, pulling a small box from his jacket pocket. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus, let me say this before I lose my nerve. 18 months ago, you walked into my life and turned everything upside down. You made me believe I was worth more than I thought. You fought for me when you could have protected yourself. You chose integrity over easy answers. He opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band with a single diamond. Elegant, understated, exactly Victoria's style. You and Emma taught me that success isn't about what you build, it's about who you build it with. You are the most courageous person I know, the most honest, the most willing to grow even when it hurts. Marcus, I don't deserve. Yes, you do. You deserve someone who sees you. Who knows you're not perfect and loves you anyway? Who'll stand with you when things get hard? He looked up at her, this woman who'd been called the Ice Queen and was actually made of fire and steel and unexpected tenderness. Victoria Hayes, will you marry me? Will you be part of our family? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice when you chose honesty over self-preservation? Victoria sank to her knees, meeting him at eye level, tears streaming down her face. When I stood in your kitchen that night, I was trying to fix my biggest mistake. I didn't know I'd find my greatest success. You and Emma showed me what actually matters, made me remember who I wanted to be. She kissed him hard, tasting like salt, and promise. Yes, God, yes. Every day, yes. Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her close, both of them kneeling on a San Francisco sidewalk, while the fog rolled in and the city hummed around them. Building something together. Finally, without barriers or waiting or fear. That weekend they drove to Marcus's apartment to tell Emma together. She looked up from her homework the moment they walked in, Victoria's ring catching the light. You're getting married. Marcus laughed. How did you know? Victoria has a ring and you both look happy crying. I'm smart, remember? Victoria knelt to Emma's level. Sweetheart, I want to make sure you're okay with this. I know I can't replace your mom. I would never try, but I'd like to be your other mom, if that's okay. Emma's face got serious in the way only children could be serious. Can I have two moms, one in heaven and one here? Yes, absolutely. Your mom will always be your mom. Nothing changes that. Emma thought about it, then nodded. Okay, then yes. She launched herself at Victoria, and Marcus watched his daughter and his future wife hold each other, building a family from the broken pieces of loss and loneliness and choices that had seemed impossible until they weren't. 2 years after the press conference that nearly destroyed Victoria's career, Marcus stood at the front of a small chapel in Seattle's Fremont neighborhood watching Beth walk Emma down the aisle. His daughter wore lavender and carried sunflowers, taking her flower girl duties with the gravity of someone orchestrating world peace. Victoria appeared at the chapel doors in a simple white dress, no veil, just her dark hair falling loose the way Marcus loved. She walked down the aisle alone because she'd built herself and didn't need anyone to give her away. But her eyes never left Marcus's face, and he saw everything they'd survived reflected there. The scandals and the waiting and the fear. The courage it took to choose each other when it would have been easier to walk away. Beth officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. Marcus and Victoria came together through crisis, through failure and redemption, through choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. They built this love with patience and honesty and the kind of courage most people only pretend to have. Marcus took Victoria's hands, feeling the rightness of it settle into his bones. I was drowning when you found me. Believed I wasn't enough. You showed me that was a lie, taught me that my worth wasn't determined by people who exploited me, but by the integrity I brought to each day. You saved me. Let me spend our life returning the favor. Victoria's voice wavered but held. I was lost when I found you. Had built an empire but forgotten why. You reminded me that companies are just people, that numbers matter less than dignity, that true success is measured in lives improved, not quarterly earnings. You and Emma are my greatest achievement. They exchanged rings, kissed while Emma cheered and Beth cried, and the small gathering of friends and reformed board members applauded. That evening at their house in Ballard that was big enough for the family they were building, Marcus found Victoria standing in Emma's room watching their daughter sleep. She asked me something today while we were getting ready. Marcus wrapped his arms around her from behind. What? She asked if I thought her mom would be happy about us. What did you tell her? That I think her mom would be grateful Emma has another person to love her. That love doesn't divide, it multiplies. That families can grow in ways we don't expect. Marcus turned her to face him, and Victoria touched his face with the gentleness that had surprised him from the start. Real love isn't perfect. It's choosing someone every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. We're pretty good at hard things. We're exceptional at hard things. Outside, Seattle's rain tapped against the windows. Inside, warmth and safety and the steady rhythm of three hearts beating in sync. They'd built this from honesty and courage, and the willingness to believe that broken people could create something whole, that companies could change if their leaders were brave enough to face hard truths, that families came in forms you couldn't plan but could choose every single day. Not perfect, but real. And real was everything.